you. Good evening. Hey, Michael. We love you. I so appreciate the honor of being a voice for the collective wisdom that's in this room, the wisdom that's in every seat, in Michael's seat, in the seat that you're in, to honor the sacred that is in each seat here. I dream about you all sometimes. Not one at a time, but all together. And you're not just figments of my imagination. You're really yourselves. And we're in a place like this or something like it, like we may be at some other time. But what I realize when I have those dreams is that it's my soul. That all of us, when we're here, I think we're engaging in something very meaningful. That's our soul. It's the gift of one another, but it's the gift of this movement. All of us have had the blessing of having demonstrated in our lives that we're able to connect in this way. And if you're like me, you might be walking around a little bit today going, is this the last time I'm going to see that? Is this the last time I'm going to see this? And the answer is very clear. It's nah. May not be very soon. Who knows? But we really honor this space and just honor the unique moment we even have today to all be in the same place and time together. So we honor that. Science of mind is a philosophy, it's a faith, and it is a way of life. But fundamentally to me, it is my spiritual practice. Science of mind is my spiritual practice. Just like my meditation, just like my affirmative prayer, just like my forgiveness, just like my gratitude. Science of mind is the practice for me of bringing a consciousness of wholeness, to my activity, whatever that activity may be. And if you've been at this for a while, this whole spiritual practice thing, what you may come to realize, I've realized it for myself, is that my spiritual practice is really the only thing in my life that I really do. It's the only thing in my life that I really, truly do. I then have all this stuff happen to me. Encounters, choices, relationships, conversations. But with a strong spiritual practice, they're not reacting to those things that are going on. Everything is really a response to that consciousness that I'm able to build through my spiritual practice. I think we are mistaken about science of mind when we think it is about identifying the thoughts that are contributing to our experience, especially the negative ones. Science of mind to me is a practice of bringing a consciousness of wholeness to all of our activities and all of our experience, especially the negative ones. To transform what that means, to transform who we are. True and sincere transformation comes by being present to what that is. And so many, countless people have changed their thinking and changed their life through this philosophy. But again, if you've been at this for a while, what you realize as well is that some beliefs run deep and they kick hard. Some beliefs run deep and they kick hard. Do you have any of those? In science of mind, it's not that simple as just throwing out the fishing pole and picking the thoughts out of our stream of consciousness. They're in the marrow of our bones. They can haunt us at times. I remember as a young boy even building the belief that I was a robot the family had purchased from Kmart, and that if I misbehaved, they were going to return me to the store and get a new one. Now, through all this spiritual practice and through this minister and being a minister and recognizing I'm whole, perfect, and complete, I still sometimes am that little robot that's scared that he's going to get taken back to the store. So we have these beliefs and they haunt us sometimes. I'm not good enough. I'm broken. God maybe doesn't exist. When it's all over, maybe just the lights will go out and nothing will be there. We get haunted by these beliefs. I had the opportunity recently to work with a woman who had a story that she was very deeply into. And the belief went like this: God did not mean for me to be loved. God did not mean for me to be loved. And she had a story to support that view. When she was little, she learned that her mom hadn't really wanted a girl, but wanted a boy. And so she would take it out on her in unconscious ways by saying, the reason that you're so homely is because you were supposed to be a boy. When she was in high school, she did meet someone and she got married and she had a child, but he left her soon after. And this is where she got this idea that she was meant to love. She had this beautiful child, but she wasn't meant to be love. To be loved. Throughout her life, she would have some other relationships, and they were boyfriends that would kind of come in like the seasons. They'd come in every once in a while into her life because they knew that she would love them, but they also knew that they wouldn't have to be responsible for loving her in return. And so listening to her story, of course, I had immense compassion for her. Yet I could only really ask one question. It's a question we all need to ask ourselves when it comes to some of our stories and beliefs about ourselves sometime. What if you're wrong? What if we're wrong? What if God does mean for you to be loved? What if you are good enough? What if you are holding yourself back? This is the power that can come through that spiritual practice of bringing a consciousness of wholeness into our lives. But it demands, true transformation demands a commitment to truth, a commitment to what is. What is the truth, said Meister Eckhart? The truth is something so noble that if God could turn aside from it, I could keep the truth and let God go. Our beliefs must become our own. Abraham Maslow, the great psychologist, he said, do you know who I believe have the most trouble having religious experiences? Religious people. The reason why, and we can even do this if we're not careful in our own spirituality, is we can begin to depend on somebody else's beliefs for us. So sometimes in different religions, we depend on someone who hasn't had a religious experience themselves telling us about someone else's religious experience. And on our own faith, in religious science, I don't think it's so much like this, but we do need to be cautious of what I'd call a spiritual correctness. A spiritual correctness that isn't just our fancy jargon, but it's a way of believing, a way of acting that is great beliefs, but when we're not truly believing them, when we're just expressing them because we think it's the right thing to do, they really impede upon us. They become like a shield that covers up our unbelief, our lack of faith. It's a shield belief. Does anyone have a shield belief? I can have them all the time. Love at different times in my life has been a shield belief. I believe in love most of the time. But sometimes I put love up as a shield to cover up where I'm really not loving, where I'm really not feeling loved. Have you ever yelled, "I love you" at someone? Have you ever said, "I love you" just to avoid a conversation or to get off the phone? Have you ever said, "I love you" and been in judgment of someone? Have you ever said, "I love you" and been afraid of someone? I have. God has been a shield belief that I've used before. I feel very blessed in personal tragedies and difficulties. I always feel the presence of God right there. But I swear, you ask me to do a food blessing and I become an atheist stat. It's just that for me, there's something about the formalities of God, the God that needs to be expressed at this point and that point, that causes me up to throw up a shield to cover up my unbelief. The biggest times, to be honest, where I throw up that shield is when I'm watching something on the news, like the video we watched this morning of Aurora, or I'm listening to a young man in Sanford, Florida be murdered, or you pick your story, 19 firefighters dying in Arizona. the right thing to do is go, God's right there, right? To throw up that belief, to go to where I know I'm supposed to go. But sometimes true transformation, again, comes when I'm willing to be present to a God I don't understand. Not to pretend to a God I don't know how to believe in because I can't see it, but to be sincere to absolutely what is. It's not always easy to do, but there's no courage in standing in someone else's belief. There is courage in being able to quake in your own vulnerability, whatever may be present there for you. And so in our own philosophy, we have to be careful in our own personal practice and as a movement to make sure that our adage does not get changed from change your thinking, change your life, to avoid your thinking, change your vocabulary. Right? And I don't mean to be pious because I'm a huge offender. There's times within myself that I'm very pessimistic. I might be thinking something like, I can't take this anymore. I give up. But I'm a minister, so I get to say, I surrender it to God. Right? You see how quickly we can impede upon ourselves if we're not careful? Inside I can say, I know I'm right, I'm never wrong. And outside I can say, I hold firmly to my conviction in this belief. Inside, I can wonder to myself, Josh, are you living in a fantasy world right now? And I can vocalize it as, let's close our eyes and go within. Now, I couldn't promote more the idea and the understanding of surrendering to God, of being firm in our conviction and in our belief, or in the power of going within. Yet, I always have to watch myself in my own practice to make sure I'm not moving to a belief that isn't truly mine to own. Because true and sincere transformation must come through our own mind, through our own affairs, through our own being, no matter who else's wisdom. It's the wisdom in your seat, in your own being, that will lead you to that understanding that can free you. And we all have to get in our own way. I remember entering into ministerial school in 2002 or 2003 and being in a small group, and we were going to do a guided visualization to find our inner guide, our inner wisdom self. And this guide was not only supposed to lead us through ministerial school, but it was also supposed to lead us throughout our whole lives. And I was terrified what I saw. We were all done. We had to share, and someone said, oh, I saw a Christ-like figure. Someone saw a bodhisattva. Someone saw their great-grandmother, and I had to admit who I saw. Gumby. It was a giant Gumby, green, pointed head, kind of an orange, pokyish tongue. Just be yourself, Josh. Follow your heart. It wasn't easy to accept, but the divine shows up in mysterious ways, doesn't it? We must be able to recognize, they say God is individual to everyone, but at some level we have to recognize we each have our own individual God, right? Through our own consciousness, through our own work. I'd go so far to, we might say that we get the God, we get the experience of the divine that we deserve, that we work towards. And then there are, of course, those times in our lives, or those times in society, where we are faced, where we don't feel like the divine is happening, where it's really rough, where the race consciousness sucks. There's a great story that the great Howard Thurman tells, the great African-American minister and theologian who was a great influence on Martin Luther King Jr., who formed one of the first interracial churches. He talks about returning as a young man with two daughters to Florida, where he grew up, and this is still during the time of segregation. And what he runs into is something that every black parent in America at that time would have to run into with their child. What do I say to my child when they are refused to be able to do something because of the color of their skin? And so he tells the story of walking with his girls and walking in a public school, and the girls sing the swings. Daddy, can we go swing on those swings? No, girls, you can't. Why not, Daddy? What would you say to your kids? Why not, Daddy? He did the smart thing. He said, let's get home, have some lemonade, and we'll talk about it. So he gave himself a little time. When they got home, he sat down with his girls and had the lemonade. Daddy, why can't we swing on those swings? And this is what he said to them. It is against the law for us to use those swings, even though it is a public school. At present, only white children can play there, but it takes the state legislature, the courts, the sheriffs and policemen, the white churches, the mayors, the bands and businesses, and the majority of people in the state of Florida. It takes all these to keep two little black girls from swinging in those swings. That is how important you are. Never forget the estimate of your own importance and self-worth can be judged by how many weapons and how much power people are willing to use to control you and keep you in the place they have assigned to you. You are two very important little girls. Your presence can threaten the entire state of Florida. The message in that, to me as a religious scientist, is for us, is to never deny the terrors of the world, to never deny that there's violence, to never deny the pain of a congregant who comes into our community that we embrace. Yet to recognize that this pain is not because we are victims, but to remember that we are more powerful than we will ever know. That our spirituality is not meant to keep us away from the ills of the world, but to apply us with the tools to confront whatever may come forward in our lives, in the lives of those we love, in the lives of our society. Yeah, thanks. We can apply this to the world, but we must apply this to our own psyches, to the oppression and the difficulties we sometimes put upon ourselves. To remember our commitment to love, our commitment to peace, and to begin in our own psyche. To be sincere within ourselves and then to share it with others. Man alone is sincere, said Emerson. At the entrance of another person, hypocrisy begins. This is so true, but it doesn't have to be. And this is where, at our conference, this is when we come together, this is where that soul happens. We begin to remove that hypocrisy within us. We begin to connect with each other in divine ways, sometimes with the holding of the hand, sometimes with laughter, sometimes here on stage, sometimes in a great conversation somewhere else. So we continue to bask in this soul. We continue to be willing to give up a false understanding of the beliefs that served us as training wheels getting into this philosophy, so that we can take them off and soar. Take them off and be who we are in accordance with our heart's sincerity, with the souls who have filled this room in our conferences, and in our own daily practices. So just taking a moment, taking a deep breath, I invite you to join me if you so choose. Just honoring the soul in this place, the transformation that comes from simply being willing to acknowledge the fact that we are here. We allow this divine will, this divine presence to transform itself in us so that it may happen all around us as well. And so it is. Thank you for your time, everyone, this evening. It was great to get to be here. Thank you. Thank you.